10 years ago, I became actively involved in fisheries management, specifically the sustainability of global tuna stocks. And I actually volunteered to lead the charge for Bumblebee on corporate social responsibility, which ultimately incorporated fisheries management, but also the broader scope of our global operations relative to environmental sustainability elements, as well as social responsibility elements. I've spent a good part of my career on advocacy, which is going to be pertinent for our conversation today, both at the industry level, but also looking at a broader group of stakeholders, including government relations and other stakeholder advocacy and outreach. As many of you probably know, AquaBounty, it has been a journey, for quite a journey to commercialization. I've known Sylvia, and again, she apologizes for not being with you today, but I've known Sylvia for many years. We served on the board together at the National Fisheries Institute out of DC, and I was retiring from my last role, and she said, "I know you're not retiring yet, and I have this opportunity." And literally within 15 minutes of talking to her, she had me hooked. I, really began to understand in the last number of years the importance of aquaculture, specifically farming of seafood, both in terms of why it's needed to fulfill a role and meet the gap in the global population growth, but also for a more effective and efficient way of how we bring innovation to protecting wild fish stocks. We are a purpose-driven culture. I was employed 3 years ago, number 25, and from day one, we've really embedded this purpose-driven culture into all that we do. And our purpose is to feed the world by transforming aquaculture with technology, creating a safe, secure, and sustainable future. And we really do that. We care for our fish, we care for our people, we care for our environment through what we identify as 4 ABIC values, and that's excellent, passion, innovation, and collaboration. And we are not a top-down driven organization. We really believe in our people and our team. And quite frankly, as innovators, as many of you are, it really requires a certain culture and a certain mindset to how do you bypass barriers, and how do you bring innovation to market in a very creative and energetic and excellent way. We're now up to a total of 103 team members in our operation. So we've had some steady growth over the last number of years. We have 2 farms. We have our first farm, which is on Prince Edward Island in Canada. There we have maintain our brood stock, which is basically the moms and the dads of our salmon, and where we produce our eggs. And then we have our first farm in Albany, Indiana, demonstration farm. It's a 1,200 metric ton facility located in the Midwest. And we have announced recently and celebrated a groundbreaking ceremony for our state-of-the-art farm, which will be in Pioneer, Ohio, which is 10,000 metric tons. So a lot of work has been done to get us where we are today. But we really are the pioneers in on-land aquaculture, again, using proprietary technology to deliver game-changing solutions to the global problems that we all face. We blazed the trail for genetically engineered animal protein. We are the first animal protein approved for human consumption in the US and Canada. So with that comes great responsibility, and also, ongoing work with a very large spectrum of stakeholders. And I think one of the differences for AquaBounty versus others that are new to or entering the land-based farming community and industry is we have 25 years of operational experience with RAS, which stands for Recirculating Aquaculture Systems. And we've been producing salmon for 25 years, growing and raising salmon in RAS for that period of time. So that's something that many other companies have not done. This is our journey. It all started back in 1989. It was a one-time, our salmon was genetically engineered one time over 30 years ago. That's when the first line was created. We've been conventionally breeding ever since. And we're now on our 14th, 15th generation of our salmon. But after the line was created in 1989, it wasn't until 1995 that FDA finally opened the books on AquaBounty and began the quote unquote approval process for our salmon. That process took over 20 years to complete, which for, within the biotech space, obviously many folks are used to long timelines in order to gain government and regulatory approval. But we were the first, and as a result, it took a lot of time, a lot of research, and a lot of data in order for the FDA to finally come with their approval in 2015. Canada followed shortly thereafter with their approval, and I'm happy to say that in 2021, we had our first commercial scale harvest of our salmon, our genetically engineered salmon, both in our Indiana farm and in PEI. For those of you who really don't understand the differences between land-based farming and more the conventional and traditional ways, it's the new way to source salmon and the new way to grow fish. In sea cage operations, there are environmental and safety issues. The supply chain can be highly inefficient. It requires extensive air freight, particularly in case of the United States. We are net importers of salmon. Most of the farmed salmon that's consumed in this country is coming in on bellies of airplanes from Norway, Chile, and other destinations, Canada as well. And then there's a reduced product shelf life for that fish, obviously because of the transportation time. The new way is putting farms on land, far from water. They're fully enclosed facilities, close to consumer consumption markets. And these are highly controlled facilities. Just picture a massive water filtration plant. That's what our farm is. These farms are designed to prevent disease and other contaminants. It's a very efficient production and supply chain, given that there's not a lot we're trucking in, or I should say air freighting in. And again, our logistics to our customers is very close to where that consumption is actually happening. I won't go through this in a lot of detail, but what I just wanted to point out, within a land-based farm, again, it's all under one roof, and there are different parts of the facility. We have a hatchery where the eggs basically hatch into fry. We have a nursery, a pre-grow out area, and a grow out area. But just imagine massive tanks that hold the salmon. We happen to use 100% fresh water from hatch to harvest. As I mentioned, our farms are carefully monitored and highly technical in order to ensure that our fish thrive and are safe. The other component I will point out, because there's been a lot of focus on this, is escapement and the potential for escapement and concerns about escapement. All of our facilities are biosecure facilities. That's not just required in terms of FDA and the regulatory components, but we also have additional areas of containment. So we surpass what the requirements are. And the key with a biosecure facility, number one, it keeps our people safe, it keeps our fish safe, but it does prevent against escapement. We have revolutionized RAS operational expertise over the years, including genetic engineering. So, we, again, going back to our purpose, is using technology and innovation to solve the problems of today and tomorrow. Just a couple key components here. Our message is pretty clear, and what we're saying is that AquaBounty salmon is everything salmon should be and more. As I mentioned, it's close to key markets. We have biosecure facilities. That helps protect against exposure to disease and parasites, but it also ensures containment of our fish. As a result, we don't use any antibiotics in our operations. Many other farming practices, aquaculture farming practices, have to utilize antibiotics. But again, with our biofilters and our filtration process, we are able to operate without those. Our fish, again, genetically engineered. There are two key components there. And the reason for the genetic engineering one time 30 years ago wasn't to grow them on land, actually. It was actually to solve a problem in ocean net pens and to protect the fish during their early stages of growth from superchill. And what the genetic engineering allowed the salmon to do, it is Atlantic salmon, and it was one gene was utilized, a growth gene, and that allows the fish to grow more rapidly. They process feed more efficiently and they grow more rapidly. And the more rapid growth was critical because there were higher mortalities, particularly in very cold ocean waters, and it allowed the fish to get to size and to thrive. That was translated into land-based operations a number of years later. Again, we've been doing that for 25 years. And we talk about sustainability. And again, I've been in this space for a long time now. And I think the word sustainable and sustainability is overplayed. But, it really comes down to proof is in the pudding, and it comes down to the elements that companies and individuals make, of how can we be better for the planet. And I want to make one other point, and I say this all the time. Our form of production, it's not better than or more important than wild capture. It's not more important than traditional sea cage operations. All of these elements need to work together in order to fill the supply gap that's existing today and will only become greater over time. And that's where innovation, not just in terms of what we do as AquaBounty, but innovation in the wild fishery sector and in traditional sea cage operations, it's going to be critical. We have to find ways and always challenge ourselves to find ways that are better operations, more efficient operations, and things that do not impact our planet in a negative way. Setting up, when Karen and I spoke, this is a critical component here. It's kind of the path to commercialization. And, as I've laid out, it was essentially a 30-year journey. And a critical aspect of that really comes down to, and for those of you that are going through regulatory hurdles, challenges, have questions, really engaging a broad spectrum of stakeholders from day one is critical. And it really starts with a very strong and proactive government relations strategy. We have a very proactive initiative over the years, building coalitions both at the federal and state levels, actually local, federal, and state levels. It includes building relationship with offices, educating these offices on various industry and company specific issues, and really asking for support and intervention on various issues. In the US, our primary targets include congressional offices. That's the US House of Representatives and the US Senate. We also focus, and I highly recommend as you're exploring the path to regulatory approval, is talk to the various federal government committees. Here in the US, we do that both on the House and the Senate side. And a big part of it is telling our own story. It's not leaving it to detractors or others to tell the story for us. It's critical that you invest your time and energy in meeting face-to-face, virtually, whatever it will take, particularly in today's landscape with COVID, ongoing COVID and other things. You've got to be creative, and you have to have a share a voice to engage these folks. The federal agencies, USDA, FDA, Fish and Wildlife, EPA, these are all really important elements and folks that we have to communicate with on an ongoing basis. Again, the regulations ultimately come from these agencies, and it is critical that you have your company and your people in front of these folks. The current administration here in the US, obviously that's the White House. There are certain agencies and departments within the White House and at the administration level that are opportunities to engage with the story. And we always talk about, it's not just the story, it's the why behind what we do. And the why is so critically important. A lot of folks I've found, perhaps in the earlier days, really focused on the science and got into the weeds on science. And for full disclosure, I'm not a scientist, and I work with a bunch of scientists who are just incredibly bright and really passionate about what they do. But I think one of the things that we within science communities and science-driven organizations is, the science is there, but how do we tell the story in a manner that lay people will understand what it means? When you get into government relations and building that coalition of support, sometimes you have to look at how you message and how you talk about it. And for me to get into the science, into the weeds of the science, you lose people very quickly. The other side of it, aside from the government relations, is a pretty long spectrum of stakeholders. And each of you can identify who you feel through that value chain is critical. I highly recommend prioritizing who those stakeholders are in terms of how you approach them. Primary targets for AquaBounty include NGOs, non-governmental organizations, ENGOs. ENGOs are a big focus for us, quite frankly, right now, where we've had the benefit now of being in market for over a year, or coming up on a full year, I should say. And it's a proactive outreach to folks like Environmental Defense Fund, World Wildlife Fund, the Nature Conservancy, to name a few. And again, I think some may question what's the relevance of this conversation. But what I found, even on my wild capture side, it's one thing to work at the government level and the agency level, but it's really engaging that broader spectrum of stakeholders where it's just informational. It's explaining what we do. In many cases, they've seen news reports, they've seen things about AquaBounty and about our genetically engineered salmon, and might take that at face value. But for us to be able to tell our story in a compelling way, and the why behind what we do, really starts to build relationships. And these are not necessarily relationships that will be established, in a day or a week or a year. But honestly, it's really about beginning the conversation with them and being there as the go-to resource. If they do get questions or have questions, it's establishing AquaBounty as that stop for them to say, all right, we have these questions, and can you tell us, what you think and what are the facts and science behind it? The stakeholder base extends to the culinary community. In our case, we are food, and we work very closely with an external executive chef that is actually building this conversation and outreach within the culinary community among chefs in particular. Our investor community is really important. Influencers are also really key to how you tell this story. And that's everything from chefs to registered dietitians to other bloggers. The science and biotech community, we're very active as an organization in bio, as well as a bunch of other industry associations, serving on various committees, and really look to amplify the message that they are bringing to the market, but they also amplify our message as well. And then you have your consumers and your customers. Customers are absolutely critical. You need to ensure that they understand the why behind what you do. And you also need to be there to provide air support. With all of us that are bringing innovative technologies to the market, there's always going to be questions, and it's critical that your customers have your support in order to tell the story. It doesn't fall on them. You arm them with the messaging, you arm them with the components for them to speak to, but you've got to do that on their behalf as well. And that really gets into the marketing communications in terms of telling the story. Absolutely imperative to tell your story. I won't spend a lot of time on this, but what I can tell you is we conducted some proprietary consumer research back in late 2019. We actually have a study in the field right now to update it. But at the end of the day, and a lot of folks, when they hear the word, GMO or genetically engineered, the majority of consumers don't understand what that even means. Some of them are supportive. Many feel that they shouldn't like them or support them because they've heard a lot of negatives about them. But again, those negatives are not based on the science or the facts. So really, it translates into how you tell your story. Once we went through this study with them, what we learned and what consumers told us is that once they heard what the AquaBounty story was, once they heard the why behind why we do what we do, we had a very high purchase intent. 7 out of 10 consumers had a willingness to purchase and try our salmon at least once. So that, again, that really gets into the importance of being able to get in front of consumers and other stakeholders to tell the story. Giving you a quick sense of what we do on the marketing and communications plan, heavy media relations. I think in our industry, too many times we're late to the game. We're reactive rather than proactive. And that's something I learned 20 years ago, is you need to get in front of the coming train. You need to be proactive and really start to build out those relationships with media, whether it be on the consumer media, whether it be the large national news organizations. In many cases, it could be the detractors. Engage in a conversation. But media is absolutely critical, because in our news world today, it's 24/7, and it's not traditional media any longer. We live in a world of digital. And things happen literally every minute of every day. Partnerships and influencers, as I mentioned earlier, establishing a relationship, or at least educating influencers, is really important. And those are everything from registered dietitians that are talking about healthy eating habits to those that support science. In some cases, it's outreach to influencers who may not support science and technology or innovation. And it's really engaging them in the why behind what we do and the facts and the science. And it's amazing how you can really move the needle with their thinking and how they interact with their followers. Leverage and build thought leadership. That's a critical role that we bring, I believe, to the industry, is thought leadership. Again, 25 plus years of operational expertise in recirculating aquaculture systems, many new players to the game. But how does that translate, not just for salmon, but into other species as well? Industry relations, encourage you to definitely engage different industry groups. They're a critical voice. It's also really important to build a coalition of support. I always say that, I can be out on Capitol Hill, going office by office, and it's my voice of one. But when you have others that support what you're doing, it really amplifies the message. And again, these are not necessarily AquaBounty specific issues, but when you build those coalition support about our industry and what we're doing, hearing it from a group of 20 versus one is quite powerful. And as I mentioned, on the sales and customer side of the equation, you got to support them. It's absolutely critical, particularly for those things that are new. We're a new company, we're a new brand. We're a new salmon. Nobody had experience with it before. So it's educating them. It's not just working with the buyer who's buying our salmon, it's going in and doing training. I had one distributor that we're working with, and they have a sales organization of over 100 sales reps that are on the street every day selling seafood products. We conducted one-on-one group training of the background about AquaBounty, the why behind what we do, arm them with the story to support their sell-in process and ongoing management of their customer base with our salmon product. And again, I've already talked about, aggressive media and stakeholder relations. The one thing I want to point out here, this is my last slide. I learned this again in my former life, but there are a lot of detractors that are out there speaking falsehoods about what we do and what all of us do, what the industry may do, or what a particular company can do. And it is important to fight back. It's important to have a proactive strategy to hold adversaries accountable for misinformation and mischaracterization. At the end of the day, you can agree to disagree, but if there's misinformation and mischaracterizations that are out there, so many times we want to sit back and hope it calms down and hope it finally passes. But what's done is done, and you need to. I believe in what my proven track record and what we've done with AquaBounty is that we go head to head to ensure that misinformation is corrected, whether that be for a particular group or in the media itself. So I will stop there, and hopefully I didn't go too long, Karen, and I will stop sharing my screen. My contact information is on the slide. If you have any questions, even after today, please feel free to reach out to me.
All right, please join me in thanking David. That was an incredible presentation.